Most people think a lack of discipline means there's something wrong with them, that they're lazy, unmotivated, or somehow weaker than everyone else. But that belief is not just wrong, it's destructive. The truth is, your brain isn't built for discipline. It's built to keep you safe, to seek comfort, to conserve energy and chase what feels good now, not what builds something meaningful later. So when you try to force change and keep slipping back into old habits, it's not because you're weak, it's because you're using the wrong strategy. The Stoics knew this long before science confirmed it. They understood that we are not ruled by the world, but by how we prepare for it. That real strength isn't about resisting temptation, it's about removing it. It's about designing a life that makes right action easier than wrong action. Discipline doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from setting the path so clearly that the right step becomes the natural one. And that's what this video is about. If you've ever wondered why you can't stick to your routines, why motivation fades, why you keep making promises you can't keep, stay with me, because once you learn how to work with your mind instead of against it, discipline stops being a struggle and starts becoming second nature. If that speaks to something in you, if you're ready to stop the cycle and rebuild with purpose, please subscribe. For the quiet decision that your life is worth shaping, one habit at a time. Most people wake up thinking their failure to follow through is some personal flaw. They look around and assume everyone else has some inner strength they're missing. But the truth is far more universal and far more liberating. Your brain isn't broken. It isn't lazy. It's just old software running in a world it was never meant to understand. For most of human history, staying alive meant doing less, not more. It meant saving calories, avoiding risk, and choosing comfort at every fork in the path. That ancient survival system is still operating within you right now. When you ignore a workout or postpone a task, it's not sabotage, it's instinct. Your mind believes it's protecting you from unnecessary danger or effort. But in today's world, the real danger isn't starvation or predators. It's distraction, stagnation, and slowly wasting your potential. You're trying to install discipline into a brain that was never designed to prioritize long-term fulfillment over short-term ease. And that mismatch creates shame. You blame yourself when you should be blaming the mismatch between ancient wiring and modern demands. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's the root of it. Until you realize what your brain is truly responding to, you'll keep calling your self-sabotage destiny when it's just outdated programming. And the thing is, this programming isn't evil. It kept us alive. It helped our ancestors survive brutal winters, endless hunger, and real threats. But now it tricks you into skipping uncomfortable things that would actually make your life better. Reading instead of scrolling, working out instead of sleeping in, finishing what you started instead of escaping into fantasy. Every time your brain senses discomfort, it sounds an alarm. But in the modern world, that alarm is misleading. It doesn't know that discomfort now often leads to transformation. It still thinks ease is the safest choice, and so it whispers the lie that doing nothing is better than trying and failing. This is not weakness. This is a mismatch. If you keep trying to override your instincts with guilt and force, you'll only end up exhausted and defeated. You'll keep trying harder when what you need is to start thinking differently. Marcus Aurelius, writing nearly 2,000 years ago, put it clearly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Strength begins with understanding what you're dealing with. Not punishing yourself, not pushing harder with a blunt tool, but rewiring what the mind responds to. When you recognize that your behavior isn't a reflection of moral failure but outdated biology, everything changes. The guilt lifts. The path forward becomes less about force and more about design. Think about it. You don't yell at a computer for crashing if it's running an old operating system. You upgrade the system. You fix the code. Discipline isn't about wrestling yourself into submission. It's about building a life that works with the brain you actually have, not the one you wish you had. And that begins with awareness. When you catch yourself falling into old loops, pause. Don't react with shame. Respond with clarity. This moment is a signal, not a setback. That's how people who master discipline actually do it. They don't have magical willpower. They have understanding. They create systems that make the right choices easier and the wrong ones harder. They respect their biology enough to stop fighting it. So the next time you avoid what matters, remember, your brain isn't against you. It's just following orders written thousands of years ago. And you're the one with the power to rewrite the script. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But mastery doesn't start with control. It starts with understanding what drives you, and then designing a life that guides that drive where you want it to go. That's how you begin to trick the mind into loving what it once resisted, not by brute force, but by subtle redirection, by showing it that discipline isn't death, it's freedom in disguise. And when the mind finally sees that, it stops pulling you backward. It begins to follow. Most people are taught to believe that willpower is everything, that if you just try harder, push longer, grind more, eventually something will click. But that idea is quietly destroying people, because when it doesn't work, you're left with only one conclusion: something must be wrong with me. The truth is, willpower was never designed to carry the entire weight of your life. It's not infinite, it's not invincible, it's a short-term resource, and it burns out quickly, especially when you're tired, stressed, uncertain, or overwhelmed. Like a battery left running in the background of 1,000 tabs, it dies quietly, and then you're stuck staring at the very thing you promised yourself you'd do, unable to move. That's the trap most people live in. They build their routines, their goals, even their self-worth, on the hope that they'll always feel strong enough to push through. But no one does. Even the most consistent people aren't powered by some mythical inner strength. They just don't rely on it. They've built systems that remove friction. They've made the right action easier than the wrong one. Their version of discipline isn't about force, it's about flow. The gym bag is already packed. The decision was made yesterday. The phone is in the other room. The path of least resistance was rigged in their favor, and that's the secret they rarely talk about. This isn't to say effort doesn't matter. It does. But effort alone isn't sustainable, especially when every part of your environment is nudging you in the wrong direction. Think about it. If your phone is on, your apps are open, your room is cluttered, your tasks are vague, and your goals are abstract, you've set up a system that depends entirely on motivation. And motivation is like weather: unpredictable, uncontrollable. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Relying on willpower is relying on what you can't control. Building systems, that's where your power is. When you remove the need to constantly decide, you save energy for what matters. That's what real consistency looks like. It's not glamorous, it's not dramatic, it's subtle, boring, automatic, but it works. And over time, it creates something stronger than willpower ever could: trust. You begin to trust yourself, not because you feel inspired, but because your life is arranged in a way that keeps what people mean when they say habits build identity. They're not just routines, they're evidence. Each time you follow through, not because you had to fight for it, but because it was set up to happen, you reinforce the belief, this is who I am now. But when people don't know this, they end up trying harder and harder until the only thing left to burn is themselves. The body gives out, the mind shuts down, the guilt creeps in, and that's when the cycle of shame begins, starting over, promising to try harder, failing again. It's brutal, it's quiet, and it convinces you that your problem is weakness when it's really just poor architecture. Seneca warned against this kind of blind struggle when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The suffering of unmet goals, of repeated failure, of internal war, it isn't fate, it's design." So if you feel like you're constantly forcing your way through life, ask yourself, how much of this depends on me being at my best every single day? And what if you didn't need to be? What if your default mode could be enough? That's what systems do. They lower the resistance. They make the hard choice feel normal. And when that happens, the entire story you tell yourself starts to shift. You stop viewing discipline as something you have to earn. You start seeing it as something you can build, not in huge leaps, but in small, deliberate choices that make the next right step easier than the next wrong one. Willpower will always fail when it's treated as the foundation, because foundations aren't supposed to shift. They're supposed to hold, and systems hold, environments hold, triggers and cues and habits, those hold. That's where your real strength lives, not in waking up motivated, but in waking up to a world you've already shaped in your favor. When you do that, you stop fighting your nature. You work with it. You start walking downhill instead of climbing up every day. And discipline slowly stops feeling like a war. It starts feeling like peace, like alignment, like finally becoming someone you don't have to argue with just to get through the day. And that's where the shift happens, from discipline as punishment to discipline as freedom. When the decisions are already made and the resistance is low and the behavior unfolds without pain, then you understand what real strength looks like. It's not in how hard you push, it's in how wisely you set the stage. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. You stop worshipping willpower, and you start building something that lasts. Motivation is one of the most convincing illusions we've ever bought into. It feels real, powerful, inspiring, but only in the moments when you don't need it. When things are already flowing, when your mood is high, when the path feels clear. Motivation is easy to come by. But the moment resistance shows up, when the bed is warm and the alarm rings early, when the work feels heavy and the results invisible, motivation is suddenly missing. You wait, hoping it'll come back, hoping for that spark to light again, but it doesn't. And that's when most people stop. Not because they don't care, but because they've been taught to treat motivation as the fuel instead of the bonus. But it was never built to be the foundation. The truth is, your biology doesn't care about your goals. It cares about comfort, about safety, about maintaining the familiar rhythm of low effort and predictable outcomes. When something threatens that rhythm, an early workout, a long study session, a difficult conversation, your brain doesn't say, "Let's grow today." It says, "Let's wait." Motivation is the tool your mind uses to justify comfort. It whispers, "Not yet, not today, later when we feel ready." But readiness is a trap. It's not a feeling. It's a result of action, not the precursor to it. If you wait to feel ready, you'll wait forever. That's why motivation should never be the first step. The first step is structure. Discipline starts when you stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start relying on what you've already put in place. The question becomes, what have I made easy to do? That's the shift most people never make. They live their lives trying to generate emotion instead of designing behavior. But emotion is slippery. It's unreliable. One good night of sleep changes everything. One unexpected stress can drain the tank. You can't build anything stable on that kind of ground. You need something firmer, something more consistent. That's where structure steps in, not as a punishment, but as protection. A shield against the chaos of moods and energy swings. A quiet guide that moves you forward, even on the days you feel like sinking. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. It's a simple sentence, but it reveals something massive. That greatness isn't forged in moments of hype. It's built in routines, in repetition, in the mundane. And that's why people who appear motivated aren't relying on emotion. They're relying on decisions they made earlier. They've created environments that make the desired action feel automatic. The journal is already open. The gym bag is by the door. The distractions are far away. They don't have to psych themselves up because the path has already been cleared. That's not a coincidence. It's a strategy. They don't chase motivation. They outsmart it. We say we'll change. We say we want better. But then we leave our success at the mercy of a mood. That's not growth. That's gambling. And eventually, the losses pile up. Promises fade. Confidence breaks. And you're left wondering why nothing sticks. But it's not because you're incapable. It's because you were waiting for something that was never coming. Motivation isn't the key. It's the reward. It comes after momentum, not before. So the question becomes, what have you prepared? What systems have you built to make the right thing the easy thing? Because without them, every good decision will feel like climbing uphill in the rain. And no one climbs forever. Even the strongest get tired. Even the passionate burn out. But if the slope is designed well, if the steps are small, if the friction is low, if the routine is anchored, then motion carries you forward even when your spirit wavers. That's how you survive the hard days. Not by being inspired, but by being ready. It's tempting to think that your future success depends on a perfect moment, some magical day where everything aligns and you finally feel ready to change. But those days are fantasies. The real change begins when you stop waiting for permission. When you take one step without emotion, without excitement, without motivation, just because it's the next right thing to do. And then you do it again tomorrow. And the next day. Not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, but to build something that holds even when you don't. Epictetus put it bluntly. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The doing comes before the feeling. The movement comes before the mood. That's the formula. And once you understand that, you can let go of the need to always feel inspired. You can replace the pressure to be motivated with the peace of being prepared. You begin to see that real discipline isn't about being on fire every day. It's about making sure the path is walkable even when the fire goes out. That's how you win. Not through bursts of energy, but through intelligent preparation. Not by pushing yourself harder, but by setting yourself up better. Motivation will come and go. That's not in your control, but the structure you create, the way you design your time, your space, your triggers, that's yours. And when you own that, everything changes. You move from hoping to doing, from waiting to becoming, and that's when discipline stops being a struggle and starts becoming who you are. Most people are told to look inward when they struggle with discipline. Dig deeper, try harder, fix your mindset. But what if the problem isn't you? What if the problem is the space around you? The invisible scaffolding that's shaping every decision you make before you even realize you're making it. The couch that's only a few steps from your bed. The phone already glowing on your nightstand. The snacks left out in plain view. These things don't just sit quietly in the background. They guide you. They whisper what's easy, what's familiar, what's immediately rewarding. And if the path of least resistance leads to comfort, distraction and delay, then that's exactly where you'll go. Not because you're lazy, but because you're human, and humans follow the path that's been paved for them. The truth is, discipline isn't some rare personality trait possessed only by the strongest among us. It's not something you're born with. It's not about having iron will or constant motivation. It's about design. The people who appear effortlessly disciplined have simply removed more obstacles. They've made the right things easy and the wrong things harder. Their environment is silently working in their favor. The choice to exercise doesn't feel monumental because the gear is already by the door. The decision to write doesn't require a pep talk because the workspace is ready, the distractions are blocked, and the page is open. What looks like willpower is actually architecture. What looks like strength is strategy. You cannot separate human behavior from the context it lives in. The desk, the phone, the lighting, the noise, all of it matters. It's not about resisting temptation, it's about avoiding it in the first place. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." But even he would agree, true adversity doesn't need to be self-imposed through poor design. Discipline, in its purest form, is not heroic resistance, it's intelligent engineering. You remove friction for the things you want to do. You build it up for the things you want to avoid. You don't fight yourself, you guide yourself. That's the game. And yet most people are still taught that they need to be stronger, wake up earlier, grind harder, push through. But how often has that actually worked? How often has shame led to lasting change? The better question is, how could you shape your environment to make the better path the obvious one? If the gym is far away, the fridge is filled with junk, your phone never leaves your side, and your tasks are scattered and unstructured, then no amount of motivation will save you. You're not failing because you lack discipline. You're failing because your environment is designed for failure, and you can't out-discipline a system that rewards distraction more than progress. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." But what you do is largely determined by what surrounds you. That's the part most people miss. You say you'll read more, but your books are buried on a shelf while your phone buzzes constantly. You promise to eat better, but your kitchen is filled with the same ingredients that built your old habits. The design never changed, and so neither do you. That's not because you're broken, it's because you're responding exactly as a well-designed brain is supposed to respond. To cues, to ease, to what's near, visible and familiar. If you want to change who you are, don't just change your intentions, change what surrounds them. Make the healthy food easier to reach than the junk. Make the journal more accessible than the scroll. Make movement more natural than stillness. When you do this consistently, your decisions begin to change without force. You begin to follow a different current, one that was set in motion not by inner fire, but by external alignment. And that's when it starts to feel effortless, not because it's easy, but because it's been made easy. Aristotle understood this long before behavioral science did. Quality is not an act, it is a habit, he wrote. And habits are not just mental, they are environmental. They are triggered by what we see, what we hear, what we feel as we move through our day. So if you find yourself falling back into old patterns, don't just examine your mind, examine your space. Ask yourself what cues you've placed in your own path. Ask what behaviors you've made hard to resist simply by leaving the door open to them, and then ask what behaviors you could unlock if only you moved the obstacles out of the way. This is the part where everything starts to shift. When you stop blaming your lack of progress on discipline and start looking at the architecture of your life, you take your power back. You stop waiting to feel different and begin building something that moves with you, even when your mood doesn't. The world around you becomes a quiet force pulling you forward, and the more you align that world with the person you want to become, the less effort it takes to act like that person each day. You begin to change not through pressure, but through precision. So no, discipline isn't some magic trait you either have or don't. It's a pattern, a reflection, a result of design. If you keep trying to be stronger without changing the system that surrounds you, you'll burn out. But if you start building the system one small adjustment at a time, you'll stop fighting your nature. You'll start leading it. And the person you've always wanted to become won't feel so far away anymore. Because you've cleared the path. You've made the right choice, the easier one. And now, all that's left is to walk it. Most people wait for discipline to arrive like a visitor at their doorstep, hoping it'll show up when they need it, that they'll feel strong enough to do the hard thing, that somehow Desire alone will carry them across the gap between knowing and doing, but desire is unpredictable, and the brain, in its default mode, is efficient, not noble. It doesn't care about your goals, it cares about effort. It picks the path that's quickest, most familiar, and least mentally expensive. That's why you reach for your phone when you said you'd read, why you scroll instead of sleep, why you snack instead of stretch. Not because you're weak, but because the path to the wrong thing is wide open, and the path to the right thing is hidden behind layers of resistance. If you want to make better choices, don't just motivate yourself. Manipulate the conditions. Put your book on your pillow. Set your gym clothes where your eyes will hit them first. Delete the shortcut to the app you always lose hours to. Create micro-frictions that trip up your worst impulses before they even have a chance to speak. These aren't hacks. They're defense systems. Tiny traps designed not to punish you, but to catch your habits before they lead you astray. Because habits don't begin at action. They begin at cues. And if you don't control the cues, you'll never control the behavior. The mistake most people make is believing that discipline is about force, about sheer will. But the most disciplined people aren't using brute strength. They're using anticipation. They know exactly where their weaknesses hide. They know what time of day their energy drops. They know what triggers their avoidance. And instead of hoping they'll be strong in those moments, they design for them. They set traps for their own laziness. Not to feel guilty, but to reduce the likelihood of sabotage. It's not about making the perfect choice every time. It's about making the better choice the default one. Epictetus once said, "No great thing is created suddenly," and that includes character. That includes discipline. You don't become consistent all at once. You become consistent in layers, through tiny decisions that seem small in isolation, but compound when repeated. And the most powerful of those decisions are the ones made in advance. When you decide tonight that you'll wake up ready. When you lay out your shoes, log out of your distractions, prep your meals, write your top priority on a sticky note and place it where you can't ignore it. These gestures are small, but they create momentum before you even move. And momentum is everything. Because once motion begins, the resistance drops. The hardest part of writing is opening the page. The hardest part of working out is putting on the clothes. The hardest part of reading is picking up the book. That's where most people lose the battle, before it's even begun. So if you want to win, you don't need more motivation. You need fewer steps between you and the action you say you want. You need smoother runways and clearer entry points. That's the architecture of change. Invisible nudges that shape behavior without drama. That lead you quietly, without negotiation, into who you've decided to become. It's not the thoughts in your head that define you. It's the repeated actions that form the scaffolding of your identity. And those actions don't happen in a vacuum. They're triggered, shaped, guided, and if you don't take control of that guidance, it will be decided for you by algorithms, by advertising, by comfort, by habit. But when you reclaim that power, when you plant reminders, create pauses, build friction where it's needed, and remove it where it's not, you start shifting the default trajectory of your days. Not all at once, but gradually, deliberately, powerfully. There's no need to punish yourself for your past. But there is a need to protect yourself from the predictable patterns of the future. If you know you always break your promise at night, design your nights differently. If you know your phone swallows your focus, build gates around it. If you know boredom leads to mindless eating, change what's within reach. Every trap you set is an act of self-respect, a signal that you are no longer leaving your life to chance or your energy to mood. You're building it, you're steering it, you're taking responsibility without shame. Seneca wrote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." But preparation doesn't always look like grand plans. Sometimes it's just one tiny nudge that redirects your future without fanfare. The rubber band around the remote, the journal beside the coffee mug, the water bottle on your desk. These things are not trivial. They are tools. And over time, they become triggers for the person you are choosing to become. The person who doesn't just wish to be disciplined, but lives in a world that makes discipline more natural than avoidance. That's the hidden art of discipline. Not dominance, not deprivation, but design. Quiet acts of foresight that reduce friction and multiply follow-through. It's not that you'll never feel lazy again. It's that your laziness will have fewer open doors to walk through, and that alone can change everything. You don't need to do everything right today. You just need to make tomorrow one step easier than yesterday. Stack those steps, lay those traps, and soon you'll find that the discipline you once chased is now walking beside you, quiet, steady, automatic, just like you planned. Most people think they need to start over, tear everything down, build a new life from scratch if they want to become more disciplined. But the truth is, you don't need to change everything. You just need to change how you use what you already do. Because your life, as it stands today, is already filled with rituals, some conscious, most automatic. You wake up, check your phone, you brush your teeth, you pour your coffee, maybe in the same mug, at the same time, with the same steps every morning. These aren't just routines, they're anchors, they're patterns your brain already trusts. And that's exactly where your transformation begins, not by rewriting the whole system, but by slipping new code into the rituals you already run. You don't need to force discipline into your life, you need to stack it. Add a small, intentional behavior to something you're already doing. Write one sentence in a journal after you brush your teeth. Read one page of a book while the coffee brews. Say a daily affirmation just before you put on your shoes. These things are small, that's the point. Because small doesn't mean weak, it means sustainable. Small is how real change sneaks past resistance. It gets under the radar. Your brain doesn't sound the alarm, it just flows into the next thing. And before long, that next thing becomes normal, not forced, not exhausting, just part of the routine. That's the secret most people miss. It's not about doing more, it's about using what already exists. You don't need more time, more energy, or more motivation. You just need to attach the right actions to the right cues. The habit of brushing your teeth is already solid. Your brain expects it. So when you attach something new to it, a short meditation, a moment of gratitude, even setting your intention for the day, it sticks. Because the neural pathway is already worn in. You're not digging a new trench. You're laying a track beside one that already works, and that makes everything smoother. Plato said, "The beginning is the most important part of the work." He wasn't wrong, but he didn't mean start big. He meant start wisely. When you piggyback new behaviors onto existing ones, you skip the hardest part, the mental resistance to starting. You bypass the internal negotiations, the fatigue of decision-making. You don't have to debate whether or not you'll journal. You just do it, because it's what happens after you brush your teeth now. No overthinking, no drama, just rhythm. The rituals that already govern your day aren't neutral, they're shaping you. Every time you check your phone before you even stand up, that action reinforces your relationship with distraction. Every time you eat without thinking, scroll without reason, delay without purpose, your brain records it. It becomes the default. But defaults can be rewritten, not with intensity, but with intention. That's the beauty of habit stacking. It's not just a tool, it's a quiet rebellion, a choice to stop living on autopilot and start directing your energy where it actually matters. It doesn't have to be impressive. You don't have to write a novel before breakfast or run 5 miles after dinner. You just need to start. 2 push-ups after using the bathroom, 1 glass of water before each meal. A quick note of gratitude as you sit down to work. These are votes for your future. Small but consistent, quiet but cumulative. Because momentum doesn't care how loud you are, it only cares that you move. And once momentum builds, effort shrinks. Suddenly, 5 minutes turns into 15. 1 page turns into 3. A single act of focus becomes a longer stretch of productivity, not because you pushed, but because you aligned. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Every habit you begin can emerge from something you're already doing. Nothing has to feel foreign. You're not changing who you are overnight. You're building who you are, brick by brick, on the foundation that already exists. Discipline isn't about reinventing your life. It's about redirecting it, taking the flow that's already happening and nudging it in a better direction, bit by bit, day by day, until it becomes undeniable. The beauty of this approach is how quietly powerful it is. You don't announce anything. You don't wait to feel ready. You just act. You tweak. You build. And it starts to feel less like effort and more like identity. That's when you know it's working. When the things you once had to force begin to feel natural. When you find yourself doing the right thing without even thinking about it. That's not coincidence. That's design. That's the result of intentional habit stacking, of honoring the structure you already live in while planting better seeds inside it. You don't have to change your entire life in one dramatic burst. You just have to connect the person you want to be with the life you already live. And once you do, the change no longer feels distant. It becomes personal, present, possible, because you're not trying to become someone new. You're becoming more of who you were meant to be all along, one small habit at a time. Procrastination isn't laziness. That's a lie we've all been told. You've probably said it to yourself. Why can't I just do it? What's wrong with me? But nothing is wrong with you. You're not broken. You're just misaligned. What we call procrastination is rarely a matter of willpower. It's not about being idle. It's about friction. Psychological resistance. The brain doesn't put things off because it hates effort. It avoids what feels too big, too blurry, too uncertain to grasp. It hesitates where there's no clear win in sight. The task becomes a vague mountain, and the mind, designed to survive with as little risk as possible, simply says, "Not now." It's not a matter of weakness. It's misdirection. Your brain is waiting for clarity, for reward, for structure. It wants to know, what's the point? Where's the finish line? What do I get from this? And if those questions aren't answered, if the task feels like it leads into a fog, the brain stalls. It doesn't say no. It just quietly drifts toward easier options, things with sharper boundaries, quicker feedback, more obvious satisfaction. Scrolling, eating, checking notifications, things that make sense neurologically, even if they make no sense to your goals. This is where most people attack themselves. They assume their procrastination is a sign of failure, when really it's the brain doing its job, avoiding confusion, conserving energy. And that's the shift that matters, not pushing harder, but designing better. Because the problem isn't that you don't want to act, it's that the action, as it stands, doesn't invite you in. It's not clear, small, or rewarding enough to trigger momentum. But when you break it down, when you make the first step so easy it feels laughable to avoid, everything changes. Suddenly, starting feels lighter than postponing, and that's when procrastination dissolves. Not through force, but through frictionless entry. Seneca said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." That's the trap of avoidance. Tasks feel overwhelming until we dare to shrink them. A vague project becomes manageable when you define the first 10 minutes. A painful workout becomes tolerable when the shoes are already on. A boring assignment becomes bearable when it's paired with music, a reward, or a timer. These aren't just productivity tricks. They're psychological tools. They give your brain the ingredients it needs to say yes. Visibility, simplicity, predictability, payoff. And those tools build something more valuable than temporary focus. They build trust. Every time you follow through, even for 5 minutes, you remind yourself that you are not the kind of person who needs motivation to act. You are the kind of person who builds momentum, who engineers the environment to make action obvious and delay uncomfortable. That's not willpower, that's intelligent design. And that's why discipline isn't about working harder than everyone else. It's about removing the need to negotiate with yourself in the first place. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And nowhere is that more visible than with the tasks we delay. The longer we avoid, the heavier they become. They inflate in our minds, looming larger with each day, stealing energy even as they remain undone. But the moment you begin, even slightly, they shrink. You realize they were never monsters, just shadows. And in that realization, you take back power. This is where identity starts to shift. Not in huge moments of transformation, but in quiet decisions to make the right thing easier to do. You become someone who moves, not someone who waits. Someone who acts on clarity, not someone who is paralyzed by ambiguity. And the more often you create clear, attractive and small steps forward, the more that identity solidifies. Until eventually you stop thinking about procrastination altogether. Not because it disappeared magically, but because your systems replaced it. Aristotle said, "Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work." That doesn't mean every task needs to be thrilling, but it does mean there should be some sense of reward, even a small one. A checkbox ticked, a break earned, a visual sign of progress. When effort is tied to visible results, the brain starts chasing the next step instead of dreading it. And when those steps are small enough, simple enough, frequent enough, you stop waiting to feel ready. You start moving because motion itself becomes its own reward. There's no need to shame yourself for putting things off, but there is a need to question how you've framed the work. Have you made it too vague, too big, too dry? Have you hidden the starting point behind perfectionism, fear, or undefined expectations? Or can you make it easier to start than to avoid? That's the real threshold. The moment starting feels lighter than resisting, the cycle breaks. The task that sat on your to-do list for weeks suddenly gets finished. Not because you became stronger, but because you built a better approach. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being practical, about building a life where the friction to act is lower than the friction to stall, where the choice to follow through isn't a battle, it's the natural path. That's not laziness, that's clarity, that's engineering. And once you begin living that way, the person you become won't be the one who always tries harder, but the one who designs smarter and keeps moving forward without waiting for the perfect moment. Discipline becomes effortless the moment it becomes who you are. Most people try to fix their behavior without touching the deeper layer beneath it, their identity. They force new routines onto an old self-image, trying to push through resistance with sheer effort. But identity always wins, because no matter how hard you try, if your actions are out of sync with who you believe yourself to be, they'll always feel like self-betrayal. Eventually, you'll return to the comfort of your identity's baseline. That's why sustainable discipline doesn't begin with doing differently. It begins with becoming someone new, not all at once, but gradually, through repeated alignment between who you say you are and what you actually do. You don't need to adopt a perfect image. This isn't about becoming some robotic version of discipline. It's about integrity, about internal consistency. When your actions match your beliefs about yourself, you don't need to convince yourself to follow through. It feels right, it feels familiar, it feels like coming home to a standard you've already accepted. That's the invisible lever most people miss. They chase habits without changing the lens through which they view themselves. But when you shift identity first, when you start saying, "I am the kind of person who honors my word," each small act of discipline becomes a vote for that truth. You don't build identity in a single leap. It's sculpted in moments, in quiet decisions made when no one's watching. The choice to journal for 2 minutes, to shut down distractions, to take a walk instead of wasting another hour. These aren't just tasks. They're signals. They tell your brain, this is who we are now, And the more votes you cast in favor of that version of yourself, the more stable that identity becomes. Eventually, the action is no longer a debate, it's a reflection. You're not trying to prove anything, you're just returning to who you already decided to be. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that's what makes this shift so powerful. Discipline isn't about forcing a new version of yourself into existence. It's about removing what doesn't belong, about peeling back the layers of distraction, hesitation, and doubt until you're left with something real, something rooted. When discipline comes from that place, it doesn't feel like restriction, it feels like liberation. You're no longer pretending, you're no longer performing, you're simply acting in alignment with the person you've chosen to become. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." That clarity, the refusal to keep negotiating with yourself, is what identity-based discipline looks like. You stop searching for tricks or hacks. But it takes awareness. You have to watch yourself. You have to notice the stories you're telling. If you keep saying, "I'm not a morning person, I'm just lazy, I always quit," those statements reinforce the identity that sabotages your progress. Language isn't harmless, it's a blueprint. And every time you speak about who you are, you give your actions something to align with. So speak deliberately. Speak as if the person you want to become is already emerging, because the truth is they are. You just have to stop burying them under old narratives. This doesn't mean you won't slip. Identity-based change isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Even when you miss a day, you remind yourself, "This is not like me," and that phrase alone shifts the energy. You don't spiral, you return. You reinforce that your identity is stronger than the lapse. That one action doesn't define you, but the pattern you choose to rejoin does. That's how discipline becomes resilient. It doesn't shatter under pressure. It bends, but it remembers its shape. Seneca said, "Every man prefers belief to the exercise of judgment." And it's easier to believe you are who you've always been than it is to deliberately judge which version of yourself you're ready to outgrow. But belief can evolve, especially when it's backed by behavior. One action at a time, one silent promise kept, one more vote for who you're becoming. Over time, that adds up to something stronger than motivation, stronger than routine. It adds up to a life that reflects your values, not just your moods. In the end, the most disciplined people aren't pushing harder than everyone else. They just aren't fighting themselves anymore. They're no longer trying to act out of character. They've shifted who they believe they are, and their actions naturally follow. That's the final lever. Not more pressure, but more clarity. Not more force, but more alignment. And when you live from that place, you don't need to fake discipline. You live it. Because you've become the kind of person who does what needs to be done, not out of desperation, but out of integrity, out of identity, out of peace. Discipline was never about becoming someone else. It was about returning to who you were always meant to be, quiet, grounded, clear. The more you live in alignment, the less you need to chase strength, because it starts living in you. If this spoke to something inside you, there's more waiting. Watch the next video on your screen and keep building the self you won't need to escape from. And as always, thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal.